All right. Now, I know I'm putting you on the spot because I like to ask challenging, fun, creative questions right off the bat. And I just want to start by asking you, knowing that you've been on a lot of podcasts, you create them yourself. If we were to make the best podcast episode that you've ever been on today, what do you think we would do to make that happen?
Probably talk not that much about sponsorships, which is what I talk about most of the time. I feel like I have had a pretty interesting life, and that has led me to where I am today. That's maybe even more interesting than what I do now, like helping creators with sponsorships. Little known fact, in junior high, I was a peer counselor. So I was one of two people who were selected for this special program that they decided to start, where if my peers were having issues, right, bullying or, in family issues, whatever, instead of talking to like a guidance or like an adult counselor at the school, they had this idea of like talking to other kids your age, right? And so I thought it was cool. At the time, I thought it was mainly cool because I got to like skip class. Like I got like out of one of the class. But I grew to really, really love this part of my life where I got to like help people with their challenges and problems. And like that actually, I feel like is one thing I can point and look back to in my life that really shaped the person I am today, and having a lot more empathy around what people are going through. And so like, I think, I don't know if that's the direction you thought I would go with that answer, but like that I feel like those stories that shape us, to ultimately what we ultimately go on to do for our like quote unquote work, actually matters a lot more than other stuff.
That's awesome. I try not to guess any direction that anyone will take any question because as tough as it is, we have podcasts a lot of times in like the corporate space or as like lead generation, and it can be tough to treat it as an art form. But I feel like that's where I come from it at, like, the creative act, the idea of us making stuff together. And so I try my best to not guess any direction that anyone will ever take anything. So I didn't have a guess as to what direction it would go in, but it definitely went in a pretty awesome direction. And I think that's a really fair thing to be able to talk about all the other aspects of your life that led to this point in the journey. One of the funny things recently in my journey as a podcaster has been learning from people like Nicholas Cole, the Category Pirates, and I believe Chris Lockheed is his name. They wrote the 22 Rules of Effective Marketing or books like that. They're like a group author. They consider themselves a music band of authors. And it's interesting because I heard them talk about podcasting recently, and they were saying that a mistake a lot of podcasters do that YouTubers are good with is grabbing attention right away based on your title. And that's hard when you're talking for an hour. So the reason I bring that up is I have been like, oh, you know what? I do usually talk about people's journeys for 40 minutes, go through their story from birth till now. And then we're crammed having to be like, hey, how the heck do we get in the stuff that people came here for?
Right.
So
Right.
while I have empathy for what you're saying, I think what would be cool is maybe then what we do is kind of get your true expertise not out of the way, but tackle
Yeah.
it in a way that we bring some upfront value. And then I
Yeah.
know it's going to lead us to the question of like, how the heck did you get here? So
That sounds great. Love that positioning.
it's a fun one that I've kind of come across in my own learning recently. But you know what? That could be a creator debates episode itself. How should you
I think
flow a
so.
podcast?
Yeah, 100%. Because I do the opposite. I don't allow guests to talk about their journey at all on my podcast, because similar to that, like I just get right into the meat of it. Obviously, it's a different format, and there people are debating each other, but it's like I do the 2-3 paragraph of their quick bio story, and then I'm like, all right, what do you think about this topic? Kind of idea. So a different approach, obviously, but I see the validity there.
Yeah, and like any good creator debate, and your show's amazing, by the way. Never stop doing that.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
It's so good. And if for some reason you stop doing it, hire me to keep it going because it's like it's endless. You could create like 10 episodes a day even. So it's infinite, I suppose. But one quick story of my creating, and then we'll dive into the meat, as you put it.
Yeah.
That was a regret that I have a little bit is on my first episode, new podcaster, just figuring things out. And Buster Shear started sharing a story about how Seth Godin, and I know the story because I had already heard it in my research because I did such thorough research. And when he started sharing the story, I basically cut him off because I was like trying to say like, oh, people can hear that story elsewhere. You've told it a bunch of times. So let's talk about the other things that people came here to listen to. And it's something that I've joked with him since. I'm like, when you come back on episode 100, we're going to have to run that back and tell that story. Because had I been as much of a veteran podcaster as I am now, we would have went into the depths of that story more than anyone else had before.
Yeah.
So yeah, I can definitely see both sides. But let's talk sponsorships then, because I think that's something that if anyone tunes in from my audience who doesn't even know who the heck you are, which happens, right? We're so like segmented in social media. I've met so many people who don't, almost everyone I meet in my day-to-day life doesn't know who Gary Vee is.
Mm-hmm.
And that just goes to show, and we see it with musicians all the time too, that people don't necessarily know who we are. So I do know that you have an incredible brand story. Your ability to tell the story of being a sponsorship coach is really special. So why don't you tell the people who you are and kind of what you do in that world?
All right. So let's start from my biggest failure. Which is how it's kind of the middle of the story, but I think probably the most interesting, and I can go backwards and forwards in time. But really where this came from was, let's just picture this. I'm going to take you back in time. Okay. COVID had just started. Do you remember how terrifying the first early weeks of COVID felt? Like at first it was like, oh, it's going to be fine. And then it was like, oh no, it's actually really serious. It's not going to just be 2 weeks shut down. And then it was like, oh, this is really actually a dangerous disease. Oh, it's going to like shut down the economy. Like we're going to have to start laying off people. Like this is what happened to me is that I had an influencer marketing agency. I had a lot of full-time employees. We had a bunch of like deals in the pipeline that we were relying on, to be able to like, at the height, I was like 50K a month in payroll. And so it was like I had this big machine, that I had to keep chugging along and feeding. And everything came to a grinding halt. And it was like literally the lowest point in my life. Had to lay off all my employees, had to basically shutter the agency. And not just that, I was like in 100K of debt because I had been relying on these like big deals that were about to go through basically, and had been operating in the red for a while to kind of float the difference until we like close those deals. As oftentimes happens as a business owner sometimes, right? Like there's these like things go really well sometimes, then they don't go so well. And you kind of have to, you have employees that are relying on you for their livelihood and all this stuff. So basically this is where we're at, right? This is like April 2020. Had to lay off everyone. I was so thankful. The backstory to this is that, we were okay as a family, my wife and I and my kids and everything, because of the fact that we have been creators since 2009 personally. And so we had kind of another income stream as creators personally, working with brands and other affiliate revenue streams and all this stuff too. And so, like have that set of my experience as well, where I've kind of been in the trenches doing lots of partnerships for many years, which is one of the reasons that I started the agency to begin with, to kind of, run with that expertise. But the agency failing was so devastating to me because that represented not only 5 years of my life at that time, but it represented like what I thought was going to be the thing to help diversify my family's income. Basically, it's like we were creators for many years and we were like, okay, this is going really well right now, but it's probably like the chances of this like succeeding for another like 10, 15, 20 years or whatever, pretty low. Right. And so I was like, okay, well, like, let's get deals for other creators. That was the business case, right? And it worked for a long time. And for a variety of reasons I won't get into, it became more saturated and fractured, and then COVID happened and all this stuff too. So it was like a perfect storm of things. But like, here I was, my plan B basically had crashed and burned. Totally demoralizing. I was in 100K debt. And so I was sitting here thinking like, what now? Like, where do I go from here? Not only am I crushed emotionally, but like my professional aspirations are crushed as well. And so I am in this really low moment. And I was like, well, I do have kind of an interesting perspective now, right? Where I've been doing all these deals as a creator, but I've also been on the other side of it now. I have been on the receiving end of like thousands of interactions with creators on, executing these types of partnership campaigns. And I see all the errors that creators are making when they're negotiating, when they're interacting. And it's just, they're being a huge pain in the butt, like not responding on time and delivering stuff on time. Right. And so I was like, let me just like make a few YouTube videos about it. Like more so to just kind of scratch a creative itch. Right. And just like do something. So I wasn't depressed all the time. And surprise, surprise, like people really liked them. They were like, wow, like this is actually really useful. Can you make a video about this? Or someone would slide in my DMs and be like, hey, I actually don't have a manager. Can you help me negotiate this deal? And I was like, that's interesting.
Yes.
And then people would be like, oh, do you have a course? And I was like, course? Like remind you, we like in the, decade plus that we've been on social media, never sold anything directly to our followers other than like merch or something, but never did coaching or courses or ebooks or like anything like that. Right? It was always just like AdSense and sponsorships. That was like the main way we made money, and affiliates and stuff. And so it really opened up this like really interesting new chapter in my life where I was like, wow, I get to like this thing that I really enjoy, that I'm really good at, which is like negotiating, that I've learned because I've done it so many times. Wow, I could actually help other people doing this. And it became this just amazing new inflection point in my own journey, where I really feel like I'm in this like sweet spot in the whatever the Venn diagram is that you've seen that chart of like your passions and like what the market wants and like what you're good at or whatever it is. The Ikigai. I'm like right in the center, right? And it's been just such a blast, man. I did not anticipate it. I did not think it was going to be my new business, but I guess here we are.
Yeah, it's pretty special to have seen a lot of it as much as we can, from the odd YouTube video, seeing Twitter. Like I see so many incredible creators, but we do get a decent sense of the journey from a distance. So it's always nice to hear some of the behind the scenes of how you got there. The other thing that I know I have to challenge myself and guests to do on this show is speak in a way that helps beginners, because a lot of times terms that we use, especially in the business world, are things that people haven't even heard yet. And so when it comes to sponsorships or what you coach people on,
yep,
could we educate what that even means?
Sure. So in its purest form, what a sponsorship is, or a partnership, or maybe you've heard a brand deal. You've watched a YouTuber like talk about a brand deal or something. In its purest form is, let's say you are a creator who has developed some sort of content, right? A YouTube video, a podcast, a TikTok video, or whatever. And perhaps you have started growing a following. In its purest sense, what a brand deal is a brand will oftentimes approach you. They'll slide in your DMs or they'll email you and they'll say, hey, talk about our brand in a video. And either we'll give you something for free or we'll pay you. Like those are usually the two different versions of it. Or the in-between one is be an affiliate, meaning that we'll pay you 20% of every sale that you generate, right? And so in its purest form, this is what a brand deal is that you are basically being compensated to advertise, market another product on your platform. And so what I basically coach people with is, number one, how to forge partnerships with their dream brands, right? So it's one thing to basically kind of wait for sponsors to come to you, which is what most creators do, is they like, oh, I got an email from this awesome brand. This is great. But like a big part of what I teach is like, how do you actually not wait for them to come to you and you reach out to them, pitching something that would get them not only really excited about working with you, but wanting to compensate you and not just for free stuff, right? But then also, how do you value your work? right? Like how much do you charge? Like what are the things that you create? Like what is that worth to the brand? That's a very, very enigmatic thing for a lot of creators, creatives. And so those are really kind of the two main things that and then really the overarching message of what I teach is that how do you turn this into something sustainable and something that you can rely on, like repeatable income, where you can create, you can go into your cave and do your creative work, but then you have the kind of business stuff, keeping the lights on, and not just keeping the lights on, actually creating a pretty lucrative livelihood for yourself. And so that is also something that I talk about, is like, how do you turn this into something that's predictable?
Which is really awesome. I think I signed up for your wait list for the next time that course goes live. But I'm curious about a couple of things you said. And one of them, you referenced TikTok, YouTube, the different formats in which we can create. So, typically I'll teach it as being, just the overarching of audio, written, and video. And so in there, we have podcasts, we have blogs, we have vlogs, and we have maybe micro vlogs or shorts or reels or TikToks, whatever the hell we want to call them today. But, the shorter micro content.
Mm-hmm.
When someone's just getting started, like if you were speaking to a young relative who wanted to go into this world and they were trying to pick a platform, do you find, connected to sponsorships, that one platform is better suited than others?
So it's actually the question. This is not the right first question, actually. The best first question is, who is the audience that you're going to be serving, and where do they consume content? And I think this is a step that a lot of people miss. They just think, oh, I need to be on TikTok because like everyone's on TikTok, or, oh, I need to be on YouTube, or I need to do a podcast or whatever. And that's actually like prescribing yourself a solution before you really have an understanding of like, what's the best way you can actually serve the people that you want to connect with, basically. Right. And so obviously the simplest answer to that is like, okay, if you're going to be like targeting like Gen Z, then like, yeah, you probably need to be on TikTok, right? Like that's the easiest way to do it. But I was talking with a creator on a coaching call recently who helps people find their dream jobs and helps them with resumes and helps them get promotions and like this whole thing. And one big aha moment that we had was that he was primarily on like Instagram Reels and TikTok and all this stuff. And I was like, why do you not have a podcast, dude? Because the vast majority of the people that are like following you are probably going to be commuting in the car or in the subway, or some work from home. But like, a lot of people like are not going to like pop up Reels or TikTok when they're driving or commuting. They're going to like listen to you talk about how to negotiate a better job offer on a podcast, right? And so it's as much about who you're serving and their psychographic behavior as it is the content format. And let me dissect psychographic. What I mean by psychographic is like literally their psychological characteristics, right? Like, are they still in school? Do they have a job? Do they have kids? Like, are they, married? Do they, what's keeping them up at night? What are their problems? Like really going deep on like, who am I actually trying to like, help basically. And I think that's really when it goes down to kind of first principles, that's where you'll find the answer to this question.
It's interesting. I feel like at some point I'll have to sign up for one of your coaching streams that you do, because being able to talk this out on a personal level would be cool. Less because, or more importantly, because it's not that I don't know these things. It's that talking with other people can be so valuable. And a lot of time in creator land, we're just making stuff on islands, right? And I actually heard Chris Williamson saying that recently about how the main thing he misses about being in partnerships with people and he's running his own podcast, he doesn't have other people to talk to, just to shoot the shit about ideas that, like, not because he's not a smart dude, but because it's just healthy to talk with other people. But this show is to educate others. And so talking in general terms is more important. I was just recently today, actually before this, writing a blog post, and I was toying with the idea of where to put choosing your content platform versus your monetization strategy. And I ended up writing like a preface, like a little intro saying, this is a bit of a chicken and an egg problem, only because if you really love making videos, then maybe doing a podcast or sitting behind your computer writing is not going to be tied enough to your ikigai, as we were talking about. And so I feel like that's an interesting part of it. But for somebody who's like, oh, I don't care, I just want to run the best business, then of course it would start with target audience. So I was like, these are kind of interchangeable. And I did it probably a little bit backwards because I love podcasting. And it was like this, hey, who knows? In the future, we'll find some way to monetize. But for now, this is awesome. And so it's interesting to kind of talk through that with you, who's the expert, because I think that will really help people if they make that their first question, like their first thing on the checklist of, are you prepared to find sponsorships?
So I actually think it would be really fun to like, let's double click on this for you. Like we don't have, like, let's do it now, because I think that this is like interesting. If you'd be open to it.
I'm not video ready, but yeah, I'm always open to it.
No, let's do it. I mean, I honestly, no, I think
turn all my lights on.
No, it's okay. I mean, like even for your listeners, I think this is a useful exercise. At its very core, it's like, you know, you've told me a bit about who you're trying to serve. Actually, let me throw it back to you. Who are you serving with this podcast?
This is why it's a fun question.
Yeah.
I think I am serving youth who are considering what to do for the world of work. They know they need to pay the bills, but they really want to go into some form of creator economy, which is probably going to look like a side hustle because everyone's telling them about traditional work that they can go into in terms of college, university, workplace. The reason this show started was because in my 9 to 5, I have, I think, the best teaching job in the world of education globally. And I work essentially one-on-one, helping youth who are in jail, mental health institutions, addictions facilities, like all the toughest of tough teens, really struggling, figure out what they want to do as they come out of their struggles and into recovery. The thing that was happening was people were asking me like how to start a podcast, how to start YouTube, how to build a blog, how to do all these things. And when I went on the internet, there was so much snake oil that it was frustrating trying to figure out how to help them. And I was like, I got to figure out how to help them for myself. So I created this podcast. Since creating it, to your point, the demo and psychographics skew a little bit older. I typically have people who are like in their 40s, side hustling, reaching out to me in terms of the people asking questions, because I think that not too many 16-year-olds are listening to hour-long podcast episodes.
So you got a crossroads here, in my opinion, which is you have to figure out who you're really serving. What is the thing that gets you really excited to like keep this thing going? And if it really is serving that younger demographic who, you kind of got into it to serve, then perhaps that might mean you need to explore other content formats. Maybe the short form video on TikTok or Instagram or YouTube Shorts or whatever is going to be the way to reach them. I don't know the answer to this, by the way. I'm just speculating, but I'm saying that this should be something that you meditate around because it's very easy when things have inertia to just keep going, right? It's like, oh, okay, I have the podcast. I got to keep doing, I got to keep interviewing guests. I got to do this whole thing. And yeah, the demographics are kind of like skewing from where I originally started. But I got to keep doing it. I have the podcast, all this stuff too. And it actually takes more courage, I think, to stop and be like, okay, hold on a second here. Are we veering off the path of like why I initially started this thing to begin with? And if really at my core, my true north, my mission is to like serve these types of people, then maybe that means I stop the podcast, or maybe I do the podcast less. And even though I'm not super comfortable with short form, I figure out how to get good at it because it's that important to me to serve these people over here. I don't know the answer to it. I'm just saying like, these are questions to ask yourself, I would say, to make sure that you're like, okay, here's a good example of this is okay. When I first got into sponsorship coaching, I picked a persona. I was like, okay, I'm only going to help social media creators. That's going to be my focus, right? Like Instagram, YouTube, TikTok. That's my wheelhouse. That's what I'm really comfortable with. I've done hundreds of those deals, thousands actually. And so that's who I'm going to serve. And so with my courses and my coaching. Like if you went and looked at like kind of the page about enrolling and stuff, it would be like, this is only for people on these platforms. I was like very specific, right? Because I read the conventional wisdom. You need to like pick a lane, right?
Yeah.
And so what happened was I started getting all of these other types of creators reaching out to me, podcasters, people who had conferences, people who had communities, people who had newsletters, being like, hey, I want to take your course, but it says it's not for me. You like say on here that I'm not a good fit for it. Can I still take it? Do I have your blessing? And I would basically do this like dog and pony show, like kind of hemming and hawing and be like, well, you know, like 80% of the course would be really good for you. But then there's this other 20% that won't be that applicable. And like and so people would still sign up and get a lot of value out of it. And so I did this for the first like 2 years, basically, year and a half. And so eventually one day I was like working with my copywriter. I hired a copywriter to help better hone the marketing copy and all this stuff. And she just like asked me point blank, like, why are you like turning people away? This is stupid. Like you are depriving people from transformative change in their lives and businesses. Like it won't be that hard for you to like serve them. Right. And I like, no one had ever said that to me before. And like, hey, give me permission to like you don't actually have to like be so narrow here. And so when she like said that to me, I was like, okay, I'm going to open my mind a little bit here. And so I started doing one-on-one coaching with some of these other people. And immediately it was like universal. I was like, wow, okay, this totally helps other people. It's not just, even though I don't have a lot of experience podcasting or I have never run a conference or any of these things, like what I teach actually is universal. And so like fast forward to today, like I now have like my business is so much larger now in terms of the vision because of the permission that I gave myself to not be so myopic about who I can potentially serve. So I don't know if that story is helpful, but like, I don't know. I think you have a really interesting, some self-work to do, I think, in terms of figuring out where to go from here.
I completely agree. And I'm trying not to do it too much right in this moment, but one of the original pieces of the story that I kind of left out, I said the word jail, but the very, very, very first group of youth that I was working with, they listen to MP3 players all the time, typically hip hop music, because they can't use anything that's connected to the internet. And they're going to serve like 6-7 years. And this is not a small problem. You know, I heard Jelly Roll has a good documentary out that talks about incarcerated youth. I haven't seen it yet. But that's where it really started. That was the very, very first micro group. And it was like, how can I create some stuff that's decent on MP3 as opposed to needing MP4 or streaming, right? They don't have phones. Not that needs to stay the case. I'm always someone who's willing to grow and shift. But the shifting so far has been, and that's why I laughed when you asked who do you serve, because I was like, maybe I actually serve the people who run the programming in places like that and teachers. Right. And I think it was John Lee Dumas who said it to me, was like, well, it's actually teachers who you serve, but the content is so that they can use it. Right. From a global business perspective, though, it's like, hey, if every teacher in the world used my podcast as a way to have, hey, we're going to teach about how to get sponsorships. If you want to be a creator, put your headphones on, listen to this and sit at your desk and then write a reflection on, like using the podcast as a teaching tool. That's why I laughed so loud when you first said, who do you serve? Because I'm in the moment of like figuring this out to an extent. I guess we all are. But I do feel like it's very interesting because it's almost like when a friend of mine, she creates courses and coaching for teens. She doesn't market to teens ever. I mean, I think that's illegal, but she technically markets to parents, right? Parents sign kids up to take this course. And I know another guy has like a really good writing program like that. It's for teens, but all the email newsletter goes to parents and teachers. So I feel like the podcast is kind of that version of that as well.
Well, at the very beginning of what you just said, you said, maybe who I'm serving is this. And I want to give you the permission that you don't need to wonder. Ask them. Next podcast, in every podcast, when you do a little at the very beginning of every episode or in a mid-roll or at the end of it or something, be like, please click the survey in the show notes. Tell me more about you. I want to learn more about you. And you don't have to wonder anymore. They'll tell you. That's the beauty of it. And so I think that's another exercise probably to explore, is just like learning more. Like you could see the demos, like you said, and in Transistor, wherever you host your podcast, but like it's now about double clicking on that and figuring out, okay, Is my suspicion right? Is it the educators? Is it the people who run the programs? Because once you know that, if you do that survey and you're like, wow, 80% of the people watching me are what you're suspecting, that would probably inform your content strategy pretty significantly, I would think. Right? Yeah.
Absolutely. I love it. And so we get that kind of figured out for people. They understand what their platform is. What are the different types of ways that they could? It's so funny because a classic thing to ask on the show is the word monetize. And I know you use that in some of your merch.
Yeah.
But as opposed to saying monetize, we'll go one level deeper because you have actual expertise in the area of sponsorships. What are the different types? Because I think people typically just think like when we had Semi Stupid on, he talks about how face cream companies, give him cream. He makes a funny video, gets paid for it, rinse and repeat. That's probably what most people think of. But I know that you've shared different types of sponsorships that I think people would appreciate.
It's a great question. I think that the traditional sponsorship or brand deal, transactional nature, where brand just gives me product, I talk about the brand, I get paid, this type of thing, usually only works when you have an audience to speak of, right? The whole reason that they're wanting to compensate you, they're wanting to like pay you to talk about them, is because they're hoping that in your audience exists new prospective customers of their brand. That's the whole point, right? But when you're growing, when you're just starting out, and you don't have an audience, really that could move the needle for the brand, what you can offer to a brand is very different. And you still have a lot to offer. So what I talk about is that, let's say you get, you have 500 subscribers on YouTube, or you get, 100, 200 downloads per episode on your podcast or something like that. When you're reaching out to a prospective partner or a brand or something like that, you're not saying, hey, let me talk about you in my podcast. Hey, let me share you in the description box of my YouTube video. Because again, that's not going to move the needle for them. What you actually need to do is use your platforms as your portfolio to say, hey, brand or company, I can actually help you do this. I see that you don't have much social media presence to speak of, or I see that you don't have a TikTok account, or I see that you don't have a podcast where you can share the rich tapestry of your brand story. I can help you do that. And oh, by the way, go take a look at my podcast to show that I have credibility. And so that is a sponsorship, right? The brand is compensating you to help them with their content strategy. Yeah, it may not be going live on your platforms. And in fact, maybe down the line, that becomes part of it. Yeah, I could still talk about you on my platforms, but I'm actually going to help you do some things as well. A lot of people think that brands and companies have it all figured out, right? They just understand it, right? Like they're a company. Like, of course, they have a marketing person and a social media person. And honestly, that could not be further from the truth. Like, yeah, you're thinking about the very, very large multinational conglomerate companies. Yeah, they've got millions of dollars to throw at this. But the local mom and pop shop in your neighborhood, they have money for advertising. Yeah, it's not $100,000, but it's a couple $1,000 a month. Sure. To get more foot traffic into their brick and mortar location. I bet you they don't have a full-time marketing person or a full-time social media person. And so what would it take for you to walk through the doors and say like, hey, let me show you how we could potentially use TikTok to move the needle for your business, to get more people coming in here. Let me show you these case studies of what I've done on my TikTok or what other people have done for local businesses on TikTok. I can help you do that. That is the tried and true way to start. If you are listening to this and you're thinking, how can I get into the creator economy? How can I make a name for myself? How can I make some income? This is the way to do it. I guarantee you, this is the stepping stone to creating your own brand. And yeah, maybe down the line, getting partnerships for your own platforms. But people in your local community need so much help. Don't overlook them.
Yeah, that's pretty unique, I think, in terms of advice, which will bring a lot of value. I was literally didn't know about this, but was watching a YouTube video yesterday that Cody Warner had posted. And he's someone, because I appreciate the YouTube space, that I look up to a little bit. And he had taken one of my tweets and posted it in the video, and he was answering the question. And I had just tweeted, generic podcasting chat about how would you get to 2,000 a month. And that's basically what he said he would do with his podcast expertise, was find somebody who doesn't have a podcast, really could use one, has the money to do it, but just hasn't been able to do it yet, which I think was kind of out of left field for a lot of people. That idea of sort of like I don't know if you'd call it a reverse sponsorship or what. I know you said with like determination that is a sponsorship, but that idea of kind of flipping it to where people wouldn't suspect.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned the idea of outreach, and I know at the top of the episode, I promised to not just talk about sponsorships the whole time. I think we've done a pretty good job. But when it comes to outreach and or other topics, like if you were going to a college to talk for a while about this topic, is there anything else that we'd be leaving out if we moved on from people wanting to get sponsorships?
Yeah, I mean, I think a fundamental mindset shift, not just about partnerships, but about asking for anything in life. A major mistake that people make is making their pitch or their ask all about them. Hi, my name is Justin. I have got this podcast. I get this many downloads a month. This is my demographics. This is my blah, 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 blah. They just deleted your email. They don't know you. They don't care. They just deleted it. People call me their tough love mentor sometimes when it comes to this type of thing, but like, I just want to give it to you straight, right? Because I've been on the other end of it. I've received thousands of pitches like this. And frankly, like, people are busy. Like if you don't help them understand how you can help them, they're just not going to give you the time of day. And I think that this is like universal advice for asking for anything in life. What's in it for them, right? And so how this manifests when it comes to sponsorships is like, I have this pitching methodology that I teach called the rope method, where your pitch has to be, R stands for relevant, to something the brand is either currently doing, like a marketing campaign that they're currently doing. It's not hard, by the way. Just go to their Instagram and see what they're posting about, right? Like, right. Oh, summer, hashtag summer, blah, blah, blah campaign or whatever, back to school, this type of thing, right? It's not hard, right? That's important to them, clearly, right? So that's relevant. The O is that your pitch has to be, you have to be able to tie it back to organic work that you've already published to illustrate how you have affinity for their brand or their product. So it's not just you coming and being like, I love your brand. I've used it for 3 years. That's like table stakes, right? Like, of course you love your brand. You're pitching them, right? No, but it's like the key thing is to realize, how do you illustrate that your audience has affinity for their brand? Because again, they're prospective customers, right? The P in the rope method is proof. So how can you illustrate how you've either helped other brands achieve results, right? Really, really important concept. So it's kind of a social proof thing. And then E is easy to execute. So you're not just saying, would love to figure out a way to collaborate. That's what most people do, right? No, you're saying, I can do 10 host-read ads. I can do 10 mid-rolls. I can turn it around in 2 weeks. I can give you usage rights through the end of the year. Are you free on Thursday at 10 a.m. to talk about this? It's tangible, something tangible that they can react to. And so this is the kind of tactical advice that I give around making an ask. And this, I think, can be extrapolated to a lot of other scenarios when it comes to business development and sales and all this stuff too. So I hope the major takeaway is just like, don't make it about you, make it about them.
Yeah, it is. I hope so, because it'll be up to other people what they take away, I suppose. But in terms of what I feel like it definitely is. I'm curious to just talk about the O again quickly, because the idea of organic content seems pretty straightforward to me. But would it be where you are creating something that actually has that brand in the organic content, or this is just random organic content that you're already creating?
So a couple things here. Number one, you don't have to say the name of the brand in the content necessarily. If you want to give them a little nice little cute little plug, that works pretty good to be able to send it to them and be like, hey, check this out. Right. So that's nice. Right. But it could just be in a similar category. One example I give is this is actually a real example I teach in my program, is was doing some research on Starkiss tuna, like the tuna, little pouches and everything, right? And on their Instagram, last in May, they were talking about the Mediterranean Diet Month. This is like a thing, and how Starkiss tuna is great for it, and recipes and all this stuff too, right? And so, you know what you can do before you pitch Sarkis Tuna? You make a post about the Mediterranean Diet Month. You get a bunch of awesome feedback, comments, engagement, all this stuff. And so then you use that post in your pitch. So that's the organic content. So you can be quite strategic about this. So you can do your research and say, okay, I want to pitch this company in 3 weeks. So if I do not currently have any content that I've already published or work in my back catalog that's relevant, really, then I'm going to make one. It's still going to serve my audience. It's not like I'm just doing it out of left field. Like I want to make sure it's relevant to them, but I'm going to use that strategically in the pitch. And so a lot of what I talk about is like, you have to take it one step further. You can't just be like aimlessly, like, shotgunning the, spray and pray approach when you send out these like pitches to partners and brands. It's like, you have to be a little bit more thoughtful about what you're sending them and ensuring that it illustrates that you have credibility.
When you mentioned a moment ago about the, like, if you outreach to 100 people and that kind of thing, you have to make it not just about them. And you just, mentioned that again about going a step further. I think that's so important because some people do just play the numbers game, right? They'll hear someone say like, well, you got to take 1,000 at bats and that's how you're going to get your first 10, whatever, podcast guests, sponsorship opportunities. But I also think it's worth being like, well, maybe we should look at the quality of how you're doing that as well. It certainly won't hurt. And then from there, yes, of course, there's going to be statistics. Like open rates on emails is another good example, right? Everyone's like, well, you just, you need to send more. It's like, or maybe we could increase the actual conversions as a first step and then take the, shotgun, spray and pray beyond that.
I actually think it's bad advice. The like go at, after 1,000, like it's just at bats, right? Yes. Okay. I will agree that there is a certain amount of numbers. Like you need the sample size to be large enough to be able to make some sort of directional judgment on whether what you're doing is a good thing or not. Like I agree there has to be a sample size large enough. However, especially when it comes to pitching and sales and business development and stuff like that, the dangerous thing for most people is doing it a few times and having a negative result, which then convinces you that it doesn't work. That's the danger, is that, okay, I'm going to send out 100 emails or 50 emails or whatever, and I only get 1 or 2 responses. Screw this. It's not worth it. And so it's actually a myth that doing proactive, pitching and outreach and sales and business development doesn't work because people convince themselves, because they're doing it so poorly, that they convince themselves that it doesn't work. And so this is something I have to unlearn, help people unlearn, because it's a myth, right? And so, and what I teach them is like what we just described is like, if I could show you the framework here of like, we're just going to do research. Yeah, it's going to be more time. It's going to be 20, 30 minutes, the hour per partner, per brand that we're like researching. We're only going to send 10 though. And you're going to hear back from 4 or 5. Would you like to do that? Or would you like to do the spray and pray with 100? And so like sounds crazy, but like, honestly, think about it. If you were on the receiving end of a pitch, if someone was pitching to be on your podcast, right? And they knew nothing about you, it was clearly a copy and paste job. Oh, I just want to be on a podcast, this type of thing. And you're going to get this, it's not a hypothetical. Which one feels better? The one where the person clearly has listened to a few episodes, they understand the persona of your audience, they understand, and then they customize their pitch basically to something that's really meaningful to you. You're probably going to respond to that, right?
Even if I said no.
Yes, exactly. And that's another thing I teach is like, if the brand ghosts you, or if anyone you're reaching out to, if they ghost you or they reject you and they say no, it's not no. It's not yet. Right. And so like, just understand that like oftentimes the majority of the time, it's actually going to be no, because it's just not the right timing, or they don't have the budget, or they don't have the money or whatever. And so it's just like, that's not the point. The point is just like getting on their radar so that they know what you're all about. They know your capabilities, so that when an opportunity does slide across their desk that you're a good fit for, they're going to think of you.
Yeah, and that's pretty much exactly what I was trying to say. You said it better than me, but like I'll say no 100 times in a row if it's that just like random little, like they're hiring VAs to send 1,000 emails to people. Whereas last week, James Fell, I've read his like New York Times bestseller. His team reached out with like a 3-paragraph, very customized thing about why they wanted to come on the show. And of course, in that case, I said yes as well. But had I not, for whatever reason, I still would have replied, whereas the other ones just go straight to the bin. And for me, as you were talking, I was thinking about golf. And when I first started golfing, which is only like 12 years ago, I took it up as an adult. People would say, "Oh, you just need to do it more, right?" And I'm like, if I could go back 10 years from now, it'd be so much easier for me to start. Or right now, I could coach someone else so much easier when they're starting to just fix a few things first and then alleviate so much of that pain they're going to endure by just hitting it the same way again. And I think that's like, a pretty similar example in a completely different world. But we had talked about going over some other parts of your journey. I do pretty thorough research on this show, and then I almost never look at notes. Like if I'm helping another podcaster and kind of showing them sneak peek as to how I do things, I do intense research and then don't use them by design. Like that's kind of on purpose, right? I don't think the research is for carrying on a conversation. I think it's to know certain things, but not knowing too much, and then having a good flow of a chat. So I had jotted down, stories about when you first got into course creation. Growing a business in general, I think, is a topic that, again, I mentioned the reason for the show being there's a lot of snake oil out there, and there's a lot of like bad advice for people wanting to get into business. But since you had mentioned the idea of not just talking only about sponsorships, what are some other things that you do like to share?
I candidly kind of look at sponsorship strategy, which is really primarily my lane, as what I call kind of like a Trojan horse. Because again, like going back to like the genesis of the story, when I started the YouTube channel, I wasn't just talking about sponsorships, by the way. I didn't mention that, but like I was talking about other things too. I was talking about email list strategy and digital products and like, blah, 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 merchandise, affiliate marketing, all this stuff. I love talking about all that stuff because again, like my wife and I, we've done all those things over the years. And so I love talking about it, but it was too confusing to people. Like they didn't understand, like, okay, so this guy's going to help me with like monetization, generally all this stuff. And like, I had a follower DM me a little bit into the journey and was like, so you should like sponsorships is clearly your wheelhouse. You should like stop talking about all these other things. And I was like, that's actually a really good idea. And so that was honestly one of the reasons why I doubled down on the sponsorship coaching. Cause it was like, it went to the core of something I was feeling, and so, but the really cool and surprising realization that I had was that by doubling down on the topic of sponsorships, people began to trust me overall, generally. And so what I would find is that people would join my course or they'd do coaching or my ongoing coaching and all that stuff. And then they would just like start asking me questions about everything that I was talking about at the beginning, right? Like merchandise and affiliate marketing, all that stuff too. And so I developed this this credibility, I think, in this one area. And it was very easy for people to see like, okay, he's pretty good at this one thing. I bet you he would give some good advice about this other thing. And so what I found is that I now have been able to launch this new podcast, Creator Debates, right, where I am now talking about other topics, right? And so I finally was able to find a kind of a creative outlet that's separate from my main hustle, I guess, that allows me that ability to explore some of these other topics. And so I think it's like a good lesson that like, rather than feeling pigeonholed and like you hear all these people like pick a niche, you got to double down on a niche and all this stuff too, which candidly is actually good advice, like given my story. But it's like, realize that like, if I told you that maybe for a couple of years would go through a period of intensity, like really developing a name for yourself in a particular subject matter, but that would then allow you to develop a know, like, and trust factor with a core intimate group of people, which would then allow you to pursue some of these other creative pivots down the line. Would you do it? I bet a lot of people would, right? And so just know that you may need to go through a couple of years slog to develop that reputation first.
That is extremely powerful. You mentioned earlier when you first started the YouTube journey. Actually, it's not when you first started, but I guess when you first started your personal YouTube journey. I just made a couple YouTube videos, and that's literally what Cody Warner often will say to people is like, just make your first 10 YouTube videos. I've heard Ali Abdal say it too, right? Just go make your first 10 videos, just pick anything. And then over time, you're going to then pick a niche. So it's so fascinating. If we put it on a timeline, it'd be like no niche at all because you got to figure it out. You're follower tells you this is your niche, you pursue that for a while, and then you get to go creative again. Yeah, it's such a cool topic. But I was going to ask, because I knew that you were a creator from, you've had a long journey that a lot of people maybe listening don't even know about. I was going to ask, do you miss that more random art of like, like Casey Neistat, I don't think ever really worried about a business niche so much as he was like, what the hell should I make a video about today? If you missed that at all?
It's a great question. And I have not been asked it before. So good job. Do I miss it? I don't, candidly. Yeah. And you want to know why? Is because the game of business is what I enjoy almost as much. And so, because at this point, like my wife and I are doing well with our current, our business, like Creator Wizard business has taken off. Like for a long time, I'm making an extra $1,000 a month. I'm making an extra 5,000, 10,000 bucks a month. Cool. It's like I was just tickled by like any amount of money that I was like making. And so it always was kind of this side project, this kind of skunk work. It's just like, let's see what I could do. Let's try and grow a newsletter. Let's try and start a podcast. Let's try and do all these things. And so I had this very low ego about the whole thing, right? And I share it very candidly all the time on social media. I'm just like, this thing didn't work. I lost a bunch of money doing this, right? This thing really worked, this type of thing. And so it's, you kind of heard this build in public mantra, but I've really embraced it because I feel like a lot of people are just kind of flexing, their journeys on the internet. And so here I am just being like, yeah, I'm definitely not. I totally screwed up doing that one thing. And so that is when I think about creativity, that's what I think about. I think about the fun that I'm having exploring the different business strategies and tactics that I can employ to grow the business. And so it's as much about the content that I'm creating as it is about like enjoying the messy middle of figuring it all out. Because I know for a fact, like if I do have the privilege of like looking back on this experience running the agency, because there was a period of time in the early days where I was having so much fun, dude. Like I remember just like figuring out how to like get into these agencies and like go and try and get a meeting in front of them and like doing the research and like pitching and like I was having so much fun. And then it got to a point where it's like, I figured it out. It was like, okay, I kind of know the playbook now. And it kind of became boring, I think. And so I kind of just fell out of love with that experience. And so reflecting on that now, I'm so much more conscious of like, okay, I know about myself now that I love the process. That's what I love about entrepreneurship. And so I'm trying to just like cling to that right now, because it's almost like, this is really weird that I'm kind of calling my shot, but it's like, I know this business is going to be successful. It already is, but like, I know in like 7 years and 5 years, it's going to be like 10 times the size. Like I know, I just know it in my core. And like, I know when I get there, I'm going to be like, wow, remember the days in 2023 when it was just like in the middle of it, I was still trying to figure stuff out. Like, man, I missed that time, when it was just me and a handful of like rebels and we were, freelancers and we were trying to figure it right. So I know that about myself now. And so I'm trying to just be super self-aware and meta about the whole thing and just love the journey. And that's what when I think about creativity and I think about the process, like that's what I'm trying to cling to.
And that's what I was wondering next, was when you mentioned the agency and having to let people go and going through that difficult moment in your business life was right now. And I had mentioned the idea earlier of being lonely and on an island as creators or solopreneur. It doesn't have a lot of Google Trends, I don't think, but it's a pretty common term on Twitter anyways, the idea of building that one person business. So where is your mind now with that? It sounds like the plan is to build a beast of a business again.
No, it is actually the opposite of that. So to clarify, I know when I was building the agency, that's what I wanted. I thought that's what I wanted. I was like, okay, yeah, $100 million business, big office, 100 people, this type of thing, right? Like, and I had the payroll, I was growing and all that stuff, right? And it was fun. I learned a lot, but it was super stressful, dude. Like it's really stressful. And it became the kind of thing where like every new deal that we won went to pay payroll. It was never like spinning off the profits that I was hoping that it would, this type of idea. And so if I look at what I want this business to become, when I say I want it to be like 10 times the size, what I mean is that like, yeah, if I grew this business to a point where I was doing a couple $1,000,000 a year, had a handful of sponsorship coaches, a couple, full-time employees, that's it. That's life, man. I have everything I could ever want. I'm a big family man. I love being involved in my kids' life, and I'm a scout leader, and I want to coach my kids' teams, sports teams, and I want to like go and have awesome, getaways with my wife, and like that's life. That's all I want. I have no desire now to like hyperscale, right? And so that's a really important realization to have now in the messy middle, because it informs the decisions that I make. Right. And so I think it's like a really, really important exercise to go through, because yeah, I do really love working with people and it being very collaborative and all that stuff too. But I'm very clear on what I want and what I don't want at this point in my life.
I can appreciate that. It's in many ways why I make a lot of the decisions that I do. I mean, in some ways, all of them, I suppose. But I do stay up later some nights, grinding a little bit. But I just really, really, really try and put myself in the shoes of me at like my kid's high school graduation and wanting to be healthy. So like I'll make decisions to go to bed, even though I could have pulled an all-nighter to work on something. Or when it comes to choosing different pieces of content or things I'm working on, I do make decisions that are counter to business sense. And just a quick example, like I was a personal trainer by trade. Everyone's like, why aren't you doing nutrition and fitness coaching online? Like how Hormozy got his start. And I'm like, did that. Like and it also I have zero interest on that ikigai circle right now for me to do that. But I need to find the middle, because like you said, that could be the path to getting more crazy creative afterwards. And it's not going to be fitness, but I think it's in the podcasting world and the education world. You brought up being a family man. For me, that's really important to me too. I had shared that I always jot down a few topics. And one of those possible ones was like helping our kids, if and when they want to become content creators, the whole world of social media for them, how we balance and juggle our lives as dads, being creators. On this show, the last like at least 20, 30 episodes, people have DM'd me, or as we've wrapped, been like, oh, we're definitely going to have to do that again, because this idea or that idea would have been cool to talk about. I know that we'll have to drop the mic at some point relatively soon, but there's just so much there that we could tackle another time. I ask theme questions always, like, like some podcasters like Lewis House does, like, rattle off the theme questions. Those are always fun to wrap. But before we do, if we have an opportunity to make sure that at least this time, because, getting together again is often few and far between, is there anything else that like you'd hate to wrap this session without touching on?
I actually think we should go there into the next generation, our kids, and what this means. Like what if you look at any study that has been done around, what do you want to be when you grow up? Like for the next generation, it's like number one, content creator, influencer, right? YouTuber, Twitch streamer. It's no longer the traditional career paths that, you and I may have written in our, second grade, poster. And I think that this, even if a very, very small percentage of that actually comes to fruition, that's a massive tidal wave of kids and early adults and adolescents who are reckoning with this disconnect between the current educational system and what they ultimately want to do with their lives. And I think it's going to, in the next like few years, 3 to 10 years, it's going to be a major issue, because there's very little educational infrastructure built to support this growing tidal wave, this coming tidal wave of new career paths for our kids. And I think about it a lot, which is why I feel so compelled to do what I'm doing right now and to educate the next generation. Because like, frankly, when I quit I was in medical devices prior to, quitting to be a YouTuber full time. And I was making six figures, and everyone in my life thought I was insane, like truly insane. You are quitting to be a YouTuber. Let's get your head checked. Right. And the description that I always gave around the risk mitigation exercise that I thought through. And of course, like we didn't make this decision on a whim. Like my wife and I planned for many years and all this stuff and financial planning and all that stuff. But when you have a normal job, a normal quote unquote 9-to-5 job, everyone always thinks of that as like secure, right? When in reality, look at the pandemic, look at other periods of economic, instability. You could be putting your, busting your butt, staying at the office late, trying to impress your manager. But when times get tough, they will not think twice to let you go. At the end of the day, you are a row on the expense spreadsheet that they will figure out a way if they have to save the company. You're gone. Contrast that with being self-employed, being a freelancer, being an independent contractor, being in control of your own destiny. If I look at the YouTube example, very rarely will your income fall off a cliff like that. Yeah, maybe if you get demonetized and stuff, that's a different story. But like your views are not just going to go to zero, right? It's going to be, if anything, it's going to be starting to be a gradual decline. Right, where you start to realize like, okay, like maybe people are watching less and less, but this is going to be over a couple of years probably, right? And so it'll give you some runway to figure out, okay, well, what's next for me? What can I do now to kind of diversify here and figuring out what's my next chapter? And so I actually think and like, if you think of like, if I had to look at my QuickBooks, if I pulled it up right now, we probably have had 60 or 70 different people pay us money this year. Actually, more that's just for my wife and I's business. I've had hundreds more for the creator education business, right? So it's like, this is like massive diversification of revenue stream now versus one source. And you rely on it for everything when you're a 9-to-5. And so again, I think there's just all these dynamics at play. And I'm not like, again, I'm not going to knock people who have traditional 9-to-5 at all. Like I understand there's a lot of advantages to it, right? Like benefits, like not having to, like when you come home at night, you can check out and just watch TV and spend time with your family. And like, there is nothing wrong with that at all. I will never knock that. But, I believe the advantages outweigh the disadvantages to being in control of your own destiny, especially moving into this next like chapter of our life where certain technological advances like generative AI, LLMs are going to render a lot of traditional jobs moot. So it's going to be interesting.
Yeah. And for me to jump on that topic is really easy. Like I said, we'll definitely do another episode now that this has come up. But even if you have a very stable job, bureaucratic, like, when COVID happens, they're paying you to just sit at home and they're maybe even giving you a bonus for your mental health. You're still not in control. And I'm a big believer, having done a lot of research in the world of mental health and mental illness and worked with a ton of youth. And then my own 25 plus year journey with anxiety and panic, that I know that my health correlates to being more in control. And when I'm less in control, it's really detrimental. And one of my favorite episodes of the show is with Daniel Matte, and he wrote the book with his dad, The Myth of Normal. And this whole book's like basically about this, like what we see as normal in society versus what's actually supposed to be normal. And it's so damn hard. It's given me like chills and tension at the same time right now, because what's supposed to be normal is like pursuing our passions and doing things that we feel in control of, that we actually intrinsically want to do. The Ikigai thing, we talked about it. And so much of workplaces aren't set up for that. And in my work, people that I've learned from, John Taylor Gatto, Randy Posh, Sir Ken Robinson, have all passed away. And so when I think of my big why, and kind of carrying that torch a little bit for this exact mission, that's where I struggle with figuring out, as we talked about earlier, who do you serve? Because it's exactly this reason. You just said it. We're lacking that educational content for how do people do this. And it's not going to be me or you only who serve. It's going to be schools or some kind of system. Like we're talking about millions and millions and millions and millions
Right.
of youth who need this learning. So how does that happen? And it's a really fun question as opposed to answers. But that's exactly what I wake up every day thinking of how to tackle.
Mm-hmm.
For me, this show is one example of that.
Yeah, I love it, man. And I think it's just an ever evolving evolution. One quick bookend is that like I started calling Creator Wizard a school. I didn't before. On my website, if you go there now, creatorwizard.com, it says, what is Creator Wizard? It's a school and community that helps, creators find and negotiate their dream sponsorship. So it's like, I think owning it to some degree, like I was hesitant for a while to like own that, but like, okay, I'm taking this mantle up. Yeah, I am going to educate people. It is going to be, does that mean I'm certifying people? I don't know, but I don't know. It's like you start asking these questions when you kind of take the mantle, you take the baton. And yeah, there's probably a whole episode here because the incumbent institutions are not going to like go quietly. And they're just going to continue to teach our youth as if they're component labor, like from World War II. And it's not going to go well. It's not going to go well. So, I'm optimistic. As a final note, like one tactical change that I have made in my own life with my children is that we have stopped contributing to our 529A account for them, which was like a tax deferred educational account. And we are now contributing to a liquid savings account for them. It's because the handcuffs of a 529 is that you have to use it on a qualified educational expense. And so like we were just thinking like, we just did it because, everyone, it's like the path of least resistance. Everyone says you got to open a college savings account for your kid. And so we did it, of course. And, there's money in there. But like now we're like sitting here thinking like, what if he doesn't want to go to college? Like what college is going to look a lot different in 9 years, which is when my oldest is going to go to college or, turn 18. So I don't know, man, like these are issues that are like happening way sooner than I think like people realize. And we're trying to like figure it out as well. I don't have the answer.
And it's part of what gives me nerves too, because I think of my daughter who's 10. So similar timeline. I'm like, when I had first had these ideas like a couple of years ago, I was like, I want to figure this out by the time she's like 14. So I have a lot more of the answers, or at least I know where to point her. And I guess part of maybe all the point of this is to, live a little more in the moment while we continue to tackle these problems. With that, I'll ask the theme questions. And it is super fun when people come on the show a second time. Like I can't wait to like ask the exact same questions again and see how they've changed or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, as we are today, I guess what's one thing that you yourself are learning right now? It could be completely off brand from all of this, but just something that you're showcasing that growth mindset in.
I would say probably like how I can serve people with different learning styles that are different from my own. Because I am now an educator, officially, I guess. I know how I learn. I learn really well through like watching videos and things like that, which is why I started creating YouTube videos, right? But one thing that was very surprising to me was how much value people assign to being able to read things and being able to listen to things, which is part of the reason why the Creator Wizard universe is expanding to have all these things, to have a blog and to trying to repurpose a lot of my content and trying to do, being on short form content, right? Like these are, if I'm serving my mission of reaching all these creators, like I have to be providing education in a lot of different content formats, even though it is like runs a little bit counter to my own comfort level, because it's like not something I'm not going on TikTok and like learning from people. Right. But like, there's a lot of people who are finding me who are, and I think that that's like a really big myth is that like, okay, people on TikTok are watching short form. They're not going to sit down and watch a long YouTube video or listen to a long podcast. I have actually found that not to be true. Like a lot of people, I have found that it's like this almost like kind of like a trope, but like almost like a funnel, right? It's like people have found me on TikTok. They've then went and subscribed to my YouTube channel. Then they joined my podcast, then they joined the newsletter, and then they joined the course, or they hired me for a coaching call or whatever. So it's like they just like found all the value in all these different types of content formats. And so I think we can't, the creator economy is not a monolith, right? We can't just like, it's not like it's not homogenous. Like you have to be able to understand that there's like different learning styles. And so like, this is the journey that I'm on, is like being comfortable with that and realizing that if I want to serve the mission, the North Star for me, I have to learn and evolve in the way in which I'm serving people.
It's such a serendipitous conversation because like a couple hours ago, just again, doing some work for the business, I was like, if I'm serving teachers, how do you define teachers? I was like, is Jay Klaus a teacher? Or would someone like that look at a landing page or something and be like, oh no, I'm not, I didn't go to teachers college, right? And you said you started calling it a school. It's such a fun gray area to live in. I love it because I think the more creative and innovative we can all be is awesome.
Can I actually add one more quick anecdote here?
Yeah, of course.
So something I'm getting really excited about is the topic of personalization, because like how much more powerful would it be if you landed on my website and the words on the page were customized to who you are and what's important to you? And this is an active project that I'm working on right now, because you're going to learn a lot better if the examples that I'm giving you, if I'm sending you stories or articles or videos that are very, very relevant to your situation. So the way in which this manifests is like, I have a survey that I ask people after they join my newsletter, and I say, tell me more about you. I want to learn more about you. Tell me the primary platform you're on. What is your biggest goal for this year? Right. So all these different types of questions. And then based on what they answer, I send them different stuff.
It's perfect.
Right. And yeah. And so it's like, that is, again, going to this whole idea around like your question around like, who's actually a teacher? Well, you can collect this information and then use it to serve them in different ways. And so this is something I'm really, really excited about, because I feel, like most, and even from a practical business sense, if you're just like, oh, that sounds like too touchy feely, like from a dollars and cents perspective, like if someone tells me that their biggest obstacle is they don't have time, they're working a full-time job, that's why they can't join a course that's live or something, I'm going to send them an email with a testimonial of someone who said, hey, I took the on-demand version of Justin's course because I was super busy. I'm working a full-time job, right? So it's like, it even goes down to the like testimonials of videos that I'm sending people when they want to book my services and all that stuff too. So it's like, I love this stuff. Like, again, we were going back to the whole, like, I get excited and creative about this kind of like the operational stuff is like, I love it,
1,000%. We're definitely going to have to, in some either tiny capacity, work together or do other podcast episodes, something. I see that in the future for sure, because coaching is my background in many ways. Like that's what I did my master's in. Like, it's funny. I feel like I've talked more about myself in this episode than any others, but it's because you keep bringing
I
up
was a
such
peer
awesome
counselor.
topics. Yeah. That's how we started at the top, right? You were. But like, coaching is such a transferable thing, and people don't think of coaching as a skill in and of itself. And I find that fascinating, which is maybe something else I should look into. But, I coached a football team once. We ran the table, beat everybody by 60. I coached the smallest volleyball school in the city. We only lost once. It was in the championship. And when I was a personal trainer, everybody was losing all the weight or gaining the muscle. Like it had nothing to do with it. That's what's really truly transferable, and people don't think like that. Like if somebody wanted to teach me how to play piano quickly, I could probably go teach piano to someone way quicker than a pianist because of the skill of coaching itself. But a lot of these topics I find myself in are super meta, and it's like it's hard to explain, right? What you're doing by personalizing is going to bring the ability to have a course actually work way closer to where you can get testimonials, because people will actually be able to do it. Because that's what's tough is working even in a sports team. It scales down to how much can you improve that cornerback in what they suck at, right? You don't know until you go look and watch them do film or whatever, and then help bring them up. If you go coach them what they're already good at, Well, that's not going to work. You have to go around and help everybody at what they suck at as an individual to then have it come together as a collective.
Right.
Which usually involves taking action from the get as opposed to just learning a bunch of shit and taking action at the end. There's nothing worse than having a sports team be like, hey, we're going to learn the serve, then the bump, then, rotations and all, and then we're going to play volleyball in 3 weeks from now. It's like, no, play volleyball on day one. Everyone's going to know and intrinsically anchor their learnings to what you're then teaching in terms of skills based on what they actually need because they've played the damn game. Anyways, right. Next episode.
Yeah, for sure.
Here's a question I've definitely never asked anyone. I saw one of your social proof things said, my call with Justin felt like Superman bestowing me with his powers. How does that make you feel?
I feel so fulfilled, I think is the best description. I feel so much pride when I teach someone and they're able to apply it moving forward without my intervention. I'm not in the business of like making you, needing you to be addicted to my services. I don't want that. I want to just like teach it and like watch you float away and like take it with you. And so when I'm able to have like a 1 hour coaching call with someone or someone goes through my course and then they take that with them for the rest of their journey in this world on the internet or whatever, that's so fulfilling to me, man. I can't describe to you how awesome that feels. I think also it's probably because I have the fortune of being in this chapter of my life where I feel duty bound more so than driven by anything else. It's like a duty. It's like I have to do it. I can't, like if someone like so candidly, I had someone interested in acquiring the company, which is bizarre. And when faced with that idea of like, what would it look like for me to like not do this? Yeah, maybe there'd be some earn out. I would stick around for a year or two to like earn out the blah, blah, blah. And then I'd be gone. Like that sounds miserable. Like I love what I do. I love waking up each day and like helping creators like have these transformative moments in their life where they can now afford to quit their job and do this full time, or they now can afford to like let their spouse quit their job and do this full, it's like these are like real, profoundly tangible, like changes that I'm playing a role in. Maybe I'm not the whole role, but like a big part of the role. And like, there's nothing better than that, man. Nothing. And I feel so fortunate in that regard. So every single time anyone DMs me or says something like that on social media, I get like giddy.
That's one of the real symptoms of true manifestation is giddiness and feeling like you want to jump. So that's awesome. You keep leaning into that. And I will definitely keep pointing people in your direction because that's the opposite to the snake oil that I was really talking about, We're almost done, but it's just been so good how you elaborate. So I do appreciate it. I'm always, aware of your time just as much as mine. It may be easier to think of the next generation because we're parents. So if you were to leave a piece of advice for the next generation, that one piece of advice you get to leave, what is it?
If you do not have anyone in your life right now who believes in you, know that there will be people down the line that will. If you are in a situation in your life where you're surrounded by people who do not support you, and you're not feeling as though you can pursue the things that excite you the most or are your passions, don't lose sight of that passion and don't make decisions that you'll regret. Because in fact, like I could share a quick story. Like we have had a lot of people who have watched my wife and I on our YouTube channel, on our family YouTube channel for a decade, watched our kids grow up. And we'll have people leave comments like, I started watching you when I was like 12 or 13. And I was not in a good place. My family was abusive, or they were not supportive, or they were just, I was in a really unhappy place. And I watched you and your family because it represented like a beacon of happiness and positivity. And that really profoundly impacted me and my ability to have optimism about the future. And that, I get chills even just talking about that right now. But like we've gotten this hundreds of times. We've gotten this comment, right? And so what I want to bestow to you is that like find those sources of inspiration and optimism for you in your life, because you can't lose that childlike wonder, those things that really make you happy and positive. And yeah, right now you may be in a challenging time, but things really do get better. I really fundamentally believe that.
Thank you. If you were to ask me a question, whether on these topics or otherwise, what would be a question if you took the host mic?
What is your number one most important goal right now, and what's stopping you from achieving it?
Well, that will be a longer one for sure, because my most important goal is to make sure that my, kids look up to me, and wife and family in general, to extend it a bit, but definitely my kids look up to me as a role model, and that I'm able to give them some of the tools, like what you just said, and that beautiful quote about how to help them just like truly believe in themselves and be strong and continue to work through the tough times in their lives. And that's definitely the most important thing. And when I think about kind of work, it's being able to get this show in every classroom in the world. And what's stopping me? I don't think it's any limiting beliefs. I think it's figuring out some of the tactical stuff. And you've fueled that with a really powerful question earlier, which I'm appreciative of.
Yeah.
Just putting in the work and having patience maybe to make that happen.
Love it. Love it.
Thank you. And where and why could people go find your work online?
Pretty easy. I have a free newsletter at creatorwizard.com/join. If anything that we talked about stimulated your mind, I share 3 times a week. If you are a creator or you're interested in the topic of sponsorships, I actually share paid sponsorship opportunities every week for free as well, like actual opportunities where brands are trying to compensate creators, creatives, freelancers, et cetera, already. So, but I also talk about, share links to like my YouTube videos and articles and stuff all around the topic of partnerships and so on. So I think that's the best way.
It's amazing. And the homepage is one of the best I've ever seen. Anybody should model that if they're looking to get signups to their newsletter. Yeah, it's just facts. Like it's great. I really love it.
Thank you.
So yeah, thank you so much for taking the time to do this today. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for having me.
Boom. Mic drop.